Welcome to today's deep dive. I'm just so glad you're here with us today because we are unpacking a piece of source material that, frankly, fundamentally changes how you look at the natural world.
Oh, absolutely. And your own internal life, too.
Yeah, exactly. We are exploring this beautifully evocative story. It's titled The Innocent Girl and the Mermaid. And our mission today is really to dig past that fairy tale surface.
Because it sounds like a children's story, right?
Right. The title definitely sounds like one, but it's not. We are going to explore the architecture of solitude, the absolute, superpower of deep listening, and how an unspoken longing might literally summon the impossible.
It is such a remarkable text to decode. And I think to really understand what's happening here, we have to start by looking at the
The
environment.
setting is crucial, yeah.
We are dropped into this unnamed village at the absolute edge of the world. And the people there, the fishermen, the salt wives, the net menders, they operate on this strict code of pragmatism.
Very practical people.
Highly practical. For them, the ocean is just a resource. It's a shipping lane, a place to harvest food. It's a system to be managed.
Which makes perfect sense when your survival depends on it.
Yeah.
If your livelihood relies on sturdy nets and predictable weather, allowing yourself to feel wonder about the ocean is, well, it's a liability.
It's dangerous, yeah.
Right. Wonder distracts you. Wonder makes you forget to tie a knot properly. So this entire society has this unspoken agreement to completely ignore the mystery of the sea.
They survive by basically flattening the world into something purely practical.
Yeah, a total defense mechanism. And that creates this really stark, rigid backdrop for our protagonist. Her name is Leela. She's a 22-year-old woman, and she lives completely alone in the very last cottage before the cliffs.
And there's a wonderful visual detail about her house.
Oh, the door.
Yes, the door is faded blue, and the text describes it as the color of a held breath.
A held breath. I love that.
It's so good. It establishes her immediately as someone who is existing in a state of suspension, living on the periphery of this highly practical society.
Right, because she goes to the market, she helps mend sails, she is kind to her neighbors, but she operates on a completely different frequency.
Totally different.
The village just considers her a bit strange. Not dangerous, just, an oddity. Like a weird weather pattern or a tide that comes in sideways.
And the foundation for her worldview comes from a physical inheritance. 2 years before the story begins, her grandmother passes away and leaves her this wooden chest full of journals.
With handwriting as tiny as sea insects, the story says.
Exactly. And those journals are the cipher to Leela's entire existence. Her grandmother was basically the original rebel in this village.
Just quietly documenting a belief system everyone else had discarded centuries ago.
Right. She wrote about the sentience of the tides, the physical memory of water, this idea that the natural world is not just a static backdrop, but an active participant.
Reading those journals must have felt like finding the missing legend to a map of a country she had been walking around in her entire life, but could never properly navigate.
That's a great way to put it.
She reads them cover to cover, and suddenly, her internal world is validated. And this brings up a psychological dynamic that I think is incredibly relevant for anyone listening right now.
The isolation aspect.
Yes. We usually frame isolation as a deficit.
Yeah.
If you are alone, you are supposed to be lonely, and that loneliness is supposed to hurt.
But the narrative subverts that expectation so beautifully. Leela is deeply isolated, but she is not in pain.
No, not at all.
Her loneliness is not an ache, it's just a familiar companion. She has taken all that space that most people fill with noise or distraction and utilized it to develop an incredible trait.
She listens.
She listens. She practices a form of radical observation.
Let's talk about the mechanics of that listening, because it is not just, being a good conversationalist. She is tuning in to the environment in a way that requires immense stillness. She notes the exact moment the wind changes direction at midnight. She listens to the difference between the sound of autumn rain on her roof versus summer rain. Think about your own life for a second. How often do we just sit and listen to the weather without a podcast on or music or scrolling on a phone?
Almost never. It requires a tremendous dismantling of ego to listen like that. You have to start demanding that the world entertain you and just simply become a witness to it.
Right. And her notebooks are filled with these observations. They aren't strict scientific data points, but they aren't flowery poetry either.
They are evidence of a profound presence.
And that presence is deeply tied to a specific piece of advice from her grandmother's journals. The grandmother wrote that feelings are not problems to be solved. They are tides. You let them come in, you let them go out, and your only job is not to drown.
which changes the entire paradigm of emotional regulation.
Completely changes it.
If we break down the psychology of that, it aligns with radical acceptance. When most of us feel a negative emotion, anger, sadness, anxiety, our instinct is to intellectualize it.
We want to fix it. Figure out the root cause immediately.
Right, we treat the emotion as an error in our operating system. But Leela treats her emotions as natural phenomena. If sadness arrives, it is high tide. She doesn't fight it, she simply waits for it to recede.
By removing the resistance, she removes the panic.
Exactly.
And that lack of internal panic is the crucial setup for what happens next. It brings us to the inciting incident, the specific evening where the impossible happens.
The difficult day.
Yes, Leela is having what the text calls a difficult day. But it's careful to point out there was no tragedy, nobody died. It was just the accumulated weight of smallness.
The weight of smallness, that is such a universally resonant concept.
I felt that in my bones when I read it.
Right, it's the exhaustion of minor frictions. An unsent letter, an unnamed heavy feeling following you from room to room. The kind of day that makes you want to just crawl under a blanket and shut the world out.
And her instinct is definitely to stay indoors. But there's this internal gravitational pull pushing her out the door for her daily ritual at the shore.
And the atmospheric description here is so vivid.
Oh, the sky is heavily bruised, painfully orange, like a tangerine left out in the sun too long. And the sea itself is moving with this heavy, sluggish anticipation.
Like water holding its breath before a storm, the external environment is perfectly mirroring her internal psychological state.
So she sits down at the tide line, opens her notebook, and tries to articulate the heaviness. She writes, "I don't know what I am waiting for."
And she crosses it out.
Right, crosses it out, writes it again. It is the ultimate expression of feeling a massive emotional capacity, but having absolutely no target for it.
And the tension is just building and building.
And then the physical reality of the ocean starts to warp. The water comes up higher than the tide should allow. It touches her ankles, retreats, then reaches further. And on the third wave, a luminous, pale hand simply appears.
Just resting in the wet sand next to hers.
And a woman emerges from the waist up, a literal mermaid. Now, from a purely human psychology standpoint, this is where my brain short-circuits.
For sure.
If I am sitting alone on a beach at dusk, and a glowing, disembodied hand washes up beside me, followed by a mythical creature, my fight-or-flight response is kicking into overdrive. I am running, or I am screaming. But Leela doesn't flinch.
She doesn't. And she doesn't flinch because her baseline reality has already been recalibrated by her grandmother. If you spend 2 years treating your own overwhelming emotions as natural tides, and you spend your days quietly observing the magic of the changing wind, a mermaid is just another phenomenon to witness.
She approaches the impossible with the exact same non-judgmental attention she gives the autumn rain.
Exactly. She watches the water approach with curiosity rather than alarm.
She just looks at the mermaid and says, incredibly softly, "I thought I was imagining you."
And the mermaid's response is brilliant. She has a voice that sounds like water moving over smooth stones, and she says, "You were, and then you weren't."
That line unlocks the entire central mechanism of the story.
It really does. The encounter wasn't random chance. Leela asks what brought her to this specific stretch of sand, and the mermaid explains she didn't choose to come.
She was pulled.
Yes. She didn't argue with the pull, she just followed it.
And Leela realizes she was the one doing the pulling. She says, "My longing." That completely reframes how we think about desire. We usually think of longing as a void, right? Like an empty space inside of us.
But the story proposes that longing is a dense, heavy energy. The mermaid confirms this by calling longing the oldest language, even older than the sea itself.
It acts as a physical force.
Not a magic spell, sheer gravitational pull. Leela's internal state, that accumulated weight of smallness, was so dense it acted as a magnet, dragging this ancient creature across the ocean to her exact coordinates.
It makes you wonder about the things we silently ache for in our own lives. We assume those feelings just dissipate into the air, but what if they're actually acting as a beacon?
It's a powerful thought.
And the creature that answers this beacon is visually striking. She has dark hair that moves as if it's underwater, even in the open air. Her eyes are the exact gray-green of the ocean in that fleeting moment before it loses the light.
But the most jarring thing is her age. She remembers the tectonic shifts. She remembers when the cliffs were younger rock.
And Leela is 22, a blink of an eye in comparison.
The contrast is staggering. And it leads to a profound conversation about isolation. Because you think of a creature roaming the oceans for millennia, you assume an unbearable loneliness.
Right, but when Leela asks her about it, we get a completely different definition of being alone. The mermaid explains she doesn't feel human loneliness because she is perpetually enveloped by the water. The ocean touches everything simultaneously.
But she admits there is one specific type of connection she lacks. She has never been known by one particular person.
I love how you phrased this earlier when we were talking. It's like the difference between playing to a stadium versus a one-on-one dinner.
Yeah, think about being a celebrity playing to a stadium of 100,000 people. The stadium is a massive, overwhelming energy, but it's totally impersonal. The crowd knows your image, they don't know you. The ocean knows the mermaid chemically, physically, but it doesn't offer the focused attention of another sentient mind. She has never been individually witnessed.
And that need to be witnessed culminates in the ritual of their 5th evening together. The atmosphere is totally different this time. It's pouring rain. Leela is sitting wrapped in her grandmother's heavy wool coat.
And she asks a seemingly simple question.
Does she have a name?
And the mermaid admits she has only ever been called things by sailors, or the wives of sailors waiting on the shore, children pointing from the rocks.
She has spent centuries acting as a blank canvas for human projection. People see her and assign a name based on their own mythology or fears. She has never been granted the autonomy to define herself.
It is a perfect reflection of how we interact with the natural world today.
Oh, absolutely. We slap labels on everything. We name ancient mountain ranges after politicians. We categorize centuries-old trees based on whichever explorer, quote-unquote, discovered them. We project our human framework onto nature without ever giving it the space to just exist.
So offering that space is an act of profound intimacy. Leela doesn't try to name her. She asks, what would you choose? If you chose.
No human has ever offered her that agency.
It completely disrupts the dynamic between humanity and nature, moving from extraction to respect.
There was this long, heavy silence while she considers this. She's never had to look inward to find an identity before. And finally, she chooses the name Marin, a word that simply means sea.
And Leela's response is so telling. She doesn't make a big, profound statement. She just laughs, a very warm, soft sound.
And Marin observes that laugh the way you might watch a rare bird land on a windowsill. She knows if she makes a sudden movement, the bird will fly away. It's so fragile and miraculous.
Over the next week, their connection deepens, but they don't have these long, explanatory conversations. They develop a language built entirely out of presence.
Marin learns to interpret Leela's silence. In our world, silence is usually read as an abscess, a lack of something to say.
But Marin realizes Leela's silence is active, focused attention. It's the same radical listening she applied to the autumn rain, now directed at a living being.
Which brings us to the philosophical climax of the narrative. Leela asks Marin about her life away from the shoreline. What does she do when she isn't on this specific beach?
Marin describes endless, boundaryless movement, following whales across the Atlantic, visiting deep oceanic trenches with their own weather systems, resting on volcanic islands destined to disappear.
It sounds like the ultimate romanticized version of absolute freedom.
The textbook definition of an untethered existence, so naturally Leela asks the question we would all ask, does it feel like freedom?
And Marin's response completely deconstructs our understanding of the word. She says, I don't know if it feels like freedom. Freedom is a thing you feel when you compare it to being held. I have not been held.
That concept is so heavy.
It really requires a second to process. We are conditioned to believe freedom is the absence of boundaries. Cut all the ties and you are free. But Marin exposes the flaw there. A boundaryless existence isn't freedom. It's just a void.
Think about a kite flying in the sky. The only reason it catches the wind and arcs upward is because it's tethered to the ground by a string. The tension of the string allows it to fly.
Right, because without the string, it just falls.
Exactly. If you cut the string, the kite doesn't become infinitely free to explore the clouds. It loses its purpose and falls. Marin is a kite with no string. She has endless movement, but without an anchor to provide contrast, she cannot comprehend the joy of flight.
Being held isn't a trap. It is the context that gives freedom its meaning. And when Marin speaks that word held, Leela feels it resonate directly in her sternum.
And her physical reaction is a masterclass in restraint.
She doesn't lunge forward. She doesn't grab Marin's arm or pull her into an embrace. Grasping is what humans usually do when we want to keep something beautiful. Instead, Leela just places her hand on the sand between them, palm facing up.
An open palm is an invitation, never a demand. It is the physical manifestation of her radical acceptance. She is offering the tether, but leaving the choice entirely up to Marin.
is a stunning contrast to the fishermen in her village, who just throw nets to trap and drag things to shore. Marin stares at the open hand for a long time. The tension is palpable. And then, slowly, she places her own pale hand into Layla's.
They just sit there, skin to skin, under a canopy of stars.
The narrative describes the darkness wrapping around them like a second sea, isolating them in this quiet bubble. Neither of them spoke, yet both realized something entirely new had entered their lives.
The text names it explicitly. It is love.
Finding each other felt like coming home to a place they had never actually been. It's the perfect synthesis of two completely different experiences of solitude. They provide the specific gravity the other was missing.
And if we pull the lens back from the magic of the story and apply it to the reality of the listener, the takeaways are incredibly concrete. We live in a society that mirrors that fisherman's village.
Utilitarian. Obsessed with producing.
Exactly. Managing our time, categorizing our experiences. Leela's defining strength wasn't supernatural. It was her radical ability to listen to the mundane until it revealed the extraordinary.
There is transformative power in treating your own emotions as passing tides, and in offering an open, undemanding palm to the people around you. It reminds us that the world is infinitely more complex than the flattened version we usually agree to participate in.
We spend so much time intellectualizing our feelings, when sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is just sit still, listen to the weather, and leave your hand open.
Absolutely. And that leaves us with one final thread to pull on today. We constantly view our deep, unspoken longings as a one-way street. We think of ourselves as standing on the shore, broadcasting our wishes out into a void, hoping the universe might randomly toss something back. But if longing really is the oldest language, as Marin suggests, it requires a conversation. What if the very things you are aching for are out there right now, aching for you back in that exact same language? What if the impossible is just waiting for you to stop fighting the tide, sit quietly enough, and listen long enough for it to finally arrive at your feet?